What Japan is doing is illegal. This boat has been designed to kill whales of the Southern Ocean or North Pacific. What's the point of international law if there is no enforcement? That is why we do what we do. As soon as I arrived here in Nook, they literally ripped me off the captain's chair and handcuffed me and marched me down. I've been here for 65 days now. I'm being held for something that happened 14 years ago. The court has refused to look at the evidence. Whales are the farmers of the ocean. They're providing the nutrients to the phytoplankton. That provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe. Far more important than the trees. Since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton. If phytoplankton disappears from the ocean, we die. So I've done everything I can over the last 50 years to protect as many whales as possible. I think that there's a real possibility that we can actually break through and communicate with whales. Especially now we have AI.
From Nuuk, Greenland, I'm Chad Copeland, and I'm sitting today with Captain Paul Watson. Paul, thank you for joining me.
No, thank you.
Tell me what's going on. Why are we here?
Well, I've been here for 65 days now. I'm being held on an Interpol red notice that Japan had issued, and for something that happened 14 years ago. And I'm not too concerned about being extradited because the evidence will show that not only was I not there when the so-called offense took place, but it's so minor. And even under Greenland Danish law, I mean, if I were to be charged for what they're charging me here, it'd be about a 1,500 kroner fine, about $600.
Wow.
So under these extradition things, you can't send somebody to a country if there's an equivalent offense in that particular country.
Okay.
It's also, there's a lot of political motivation here. The fact that we were exposing illegal Japanese whaling, the fact that it was condemned by the International Court of Justice, the International Whaling Commission, the Australian Federal Court. And so basically all we did was expose it with our cameras. So I'm really being here because of revenge for a television show, and Japan needs a scapegoat. All they have to do is look at the evidence, and they haven't looked at the evidence. The court has refused to look at the evidence.
And have you seen their evidence?
Well, what happened was when the last time I was in court, the judge said, okay, we can see the evidence. And then they showed the video clip from the Japanese. And then when my lawyer said, well, here's the counter from the other side, he wouldn't allow it. I don't know if you've spoken to my lawyer, but he was pretty surprised about that. He says a lot of this doesn't make any sense. He says, I'm actually quite ashamed about this system here. I think that there's another motivation here. It's not just Japan.
What is that?
The Faroe Islands. I think that, we haven't broken any laws in the Faroe Islands, but this is way Denmark can get back at us. Apparently, the Faroese were the ones who contacted the Japanese and said, oh, well, he's going to be coming in Greenland. You should get him. Now, the red notice was gone last November. It didn't come up anywhere. I had the lawyers check into it. They selectively put out this red notice to Denmark specifically. So when I came through Ireland, went through customs, no problem. I was Switzerland, no problem. But as soon as I arrived here in Nook, there is 15 Danish police officers here to meet me, and they're a pretty hostile bunch, but they literally ripped me off the captain's chair and handcuffed me and marched me down. And you would think that I was charged with killing somebody or injuring somebody, but none of that happened.
What are the charges?
Obstruction of business, trespassing, conspiracy to trespass. And it's all based on, well, it's a long story, but in 2010, what happened was that Pete Bethune, who was not one of my crew members, he had his own boat called the Adi Gill, but he was working with us, and he was a bit of a cowboy. And he was trying to play chicken with these guys. I don't know what exactly he was doing, but the Shonamaru number 2 deliberately rammed him, and you can see this on video. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I have, yes.
But he deliberately rammed the Shonamaru, cut this $2 million vessel in two, almost killed the people on board, injured the Animal Planet cameraman on board. I was 250 miles away from this point, but Bob Barker, my other ship, rescued them and took them back. And then later, Pete said he wanted to board the Shonan Maru number 2.
Okay.
Basically to give him a notice, say, you destroyed my ship. I want you to pay for my...
Sure.
And so he boarded the vessel. Now, I told him, and I'm on camera telling him this, I said, I think you should really stay and do media tour of New Zealand and Australia. He said, no, I've got to do this. And I said, well, okay, but I'm not part of it. And I'm not part of the planning. He used his own jet ski and his own crew member. He was never one of my crew members. And he went over to the Shona Maru, boarded it. He walked up, and you can see it on camera. He knocked on the door, and he presented the letter and got arrested for trespassing. Plus, he got arrested for destruction of property because he had to cut through the net to get onto the boat. And then they hauled him all the way back on the Shona Maru to Japan and tried him with trespassing. But then he made a deal. And the deal was the prosecutor said, if you say that Paul Watson ordered you to board this vessel, we'll give you a suspended sentence, which is what he did.
Okay.
2 years later, he signed an affidavit and said that he lied in order to get that suspended sentence. And because of that, John Kerry, as Secretary of State, allowed me to return to the U.S. and said, this is bogus, there's nothing here. So I was able to come back to the United States after basically a year and a half in exile, almost 2 years in exile. And so then I had no problems after that. So this is all based on that false accusation that Pete Bethune made under duress. And that's all it is.
Well, in contrast to that, I'd like to look back a little bit, and I'd like to talk about the turning point for you from being a small child into activism and learning, about marine wildlife and speaking for the whales. Can you go down that road?
I was raised in an East Coast Canadian fishing village called St. Andrews. And when I was young, I was a member of a group called the Kindness Club, which was set up by the Premier of New Brunswick's wife, Ida Fleming. And so I was a member of that club and in fact, I wrote a book last year called Hitman for the Kindness Club because that's what she called me later. But what happened is that my mother died when I was just turned 13. And my father moved us off to Toronto. But he was a very abusive person. And so I ended up running away from home at 17. I went to Vancouver. I joined the Norwegian Merchant Marine, and I was in the Swedish Merchant Marine, and then I was in the Canadian Coast Guard, and then I studied communications at Simon Fraser University. But in 1969, there was a demonstration on the border of British Columbia and Washington. It was against nuclear testing in Amchitka. It was by a group called the Don't Make a Wave Committee, which I became a member of.
Okay.
And we decided, well, what can we do about this nuclear testing up there? And the Don't Make a Wave Committee was set up by two groups, the Sierra Club, of which I was a member, and the Quakers. And the Quakers said, well, back in 1956, we sent a boat down to Bikini Atoll to protest it. And so we said, well, why don't we do the same thing? We'll send a boat up to Amchitka to protest it. Now, at one of the early meetings, somebody left the meeting and said, peace. And Bill Darnell said, make it a Greenpeace. And Bob Hunter said, great name for the boat. So that was the Greenpeace. The boat came before the organization.
Wow.
And then they went up in October of 71. There were 13 crew members on board, and they delayed the detonation.
Okay.
And then they came back, but they're still going to go ahead with it. So that was where the Greenpeace 2 came in, and I was a crew member on the Greenpeace 2. And that was a better boat. It was a converted minesweeper. We raced up to Amchitka, but now instead of delaying it, they blew it up a day ahead of time. So we were still a few hundred miles away from it. But what happened was that it got incredible publicity, and that was the last test in the Aleutians. So I think that we contributed to that happening. So in 1972, we changed the name of the Don't Make a Wave Committee to the Greenpeace Foundation. Actually got the name Foundation from Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy, but that's another story. But in 1974, Paul Spong, Dr. Paul Spong came to us. He's a whale scientist. And he said, we got to do something about the killing of whales by Japan, by Russia, and whatever. And I jumped on that right away, and Bob Hunter too. And well, what can we do? And I said, well, in the Coast Guard, where I was working at the time, we have these small inflatable boats. So why don't we just block the harpoons with our bodies, like do a Mahatma Gandhi? We were reading a lot of Mahatma Gandhi at the time. We thought this would be the way to do it. And so, so that's what we decided in 1974. So we raised money to get the boat, which we chartered this 85-foot halibut vessel called the Phyllis Cormac.
Okay. Changed
Changed the name to the Greenpeace 5, and the project was called Project Ahab. and or Ahab's children.
Yes.
And that. And then, so in let me see, May of 75, we set out from Vancouver, had an enormous crowd to see us off. And we had no idea where the Russian or Japanese whaling fleets were, but we're going to go out there and find them. Now, one of the strangest things that happened, and something that hasn't really been reported much, is how do we find these whaling fleets? The Russian whaling fleet was the one we could find. Why? Because we had a contact who worked for Alfonso Bell, I think it was congressman.
Okay.
And we got the Russian coordinates for the Russian fleet. They're only operating a few miles off the coast of California before the 200-mile limit.
Yes.
So we had a North Vancouver telephone book as our code, and we were getting coded message from Craig Van Note, who was the aide to the congressman. And you better check with him not to use his name. I think he will. Everybody knows it. But
Sure, yeah.
but anyway, so they're off the coast of California. So we headed down and we found the Soviet whaling fleet 65 miles off of Mendocino.
Okay, yes.
And that's when we decided, okay, now this is where we're going to put our Gandhian tactics into effect. So there I was with Bob Hunter in this small inflatable boat. Six incredible sperm whales fleeing for their life in front of us, and behind us, a Soviet harpoon vessel bearing down at us at 20 knots. And every time he tried to get a shot, I would maneuver the boat and block his harpoon. And this was great. Well, I looked at Bob and said, hey, we're actually doing it. And it worked for 20 minutes. And, until the captain on the Soviet vessel came running down the catwalk. And he screamed into the ear of the harpooner, looked down at us, smiled, and brought his finger across his throat. And that's when I said, I don't think Gandhi's going to work for us today. And a few moments later, there was this incredible explosion. And the harpoon flew over her head and slammed into the backside of a female in the pod. And she screamed. I didn't even know whales could scream. She screamed, rolled on her side, blood everywhere. And suddenly the largest whale in that pod rose up and then dove and slapped the water with his tail and disappeared. Swam right underneath of us and threw himself straight at the bow of the Soviet vessel to protect his paw. But they were waiting for him with an unattached harpoon, and pulled the trigger and hit the whale point right in the head and fell back, and he was rolling in agony on the surface. There's blood everywhere. And as he was rolling about on the surface, I caught his eye. He looked straight at me, and then he dove again. And this time I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming real fast towards us. And he came up and out of the water at an angle so that the next move would come crashing down on us. And as his head, it was almost as in slow motion, as his head came up out of the water, and I looked into his eye, which was right there, so close I could see my own reflection in the eye of this whale. And as he rose up higher, I felt that this whale understood what we were trying to do.
Right.
Because I could see the effort he made to suddenly pull himself back. And instead of crashing down on us, he began to slide back into the sea. I saw his eye disappear beneath the surface, and he died. Could have killed us.
Oh, yeah.
I personally am indebted to that whale for the fact that I am still alive, because that whale could have killed us.
Wow.
And so what happened was that I'm sitting there in the middle of the Soviet fleet. The sun's going down 60 miles off of Mendocino, and I'm saying to myself, why are we doing this? Why are they killing these whales? They don't eat them. They kill them for oil, spermaceti oil. And one of the most prized uses was for the construction and maintenance of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said to myself, here we are killing this incredibly beautiful, socially complex, intelligent, sentient, self-aware being for the purpose of making a weapon for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it just hit me. We're insane.
We are.
We're just totally crazy. And I said, I'm not going to, everything I do for the rest of my life will be for that. And that's what I've done. So I've sort of got, into 50 years of my life because of that experience. I don't know why, but I feel indebted to that whale, and I feel that that's a service that I have to provide. So I've done everything I can over the last 50 years to protect as many whales as possible. And I think we've made an incredible difference. When in 1974, Australia, Chile, Spain, South Korea, Peru, Brazil, all of these countries are killing whales. And now whaling is restricted to the territorial waters in Norway, Iceland, and Japan, and Iceland's pretty much out of it. But as of 2019, that was the end of pelagic whaling. There are no whales being killed in international waters. I mean, it's been an amazing victory when you think about it.
It is.
My concern is Japan wants to return to pelagic whaling, and that's why they built this new factory ship, the Kanji Maru, to go back to the Southern Ocean or to the North Pacific. And that's why we started Operation Kanji Maru. And I think that's one of the reasons that Japan wants to stop us now, is because of that.
What's unique about that new boat?
Well, first of all, it makes no sense to build a boat like that for coastal whaling. This is a boat built for long-range whaling. It can carry an incredible amount, much more than the Nissan Maru. It can carry more fuel, and it's faster. Plus, it's also equipped with water cannons for protesters. But also, they put a top over the cleansing deck, so now you can't see it from the air like we used to film on that. So this boat has been designed to go kill whales in the Southern Ocean and the North Pacific. It certainly makes no sense to spend that kind of money to build a vessel like that for coastal whaling. So this is what their intention is. They'll deny it, but I don't see how they can explain why they got a vessel that long range, that big, that powerful for any other reason.
For the average person who might be at home watching an NFL show, why do whales matter?
My personal motivation is whales matter because they're whales. I think they have a right to live. I don't think we have a right to kill them. And I've read almost everything on the history of whales and whaling, and I think it's a barbaric and shameful history on our part for what we've done to them. But there's also the ecological importance of whales. Whales are part of basically they're the farmers of the ocean. They're providing the nutrients to the phytoplankton, where they're bringing up nutrients from the depths. Their feces spreads it across the surface like that. And, since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton in the sea. The latest article on that was way back in 2010, so it's probably worse now, but that was in Scientific America. So a 40% diminishment of a group of plants, very small plants in the ocean, that provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe and sequesters incredible amounts of CO2. If phytoplankton disappears from the ocean, we die. We do not live on this planet without phytoplankton. Far more important than the trees, which provide the other 30% of the trees and the plants. But
right,
and why is phytoplankton being diminished? Because we're diminishing the number of whales and seabirds and fishes and everything in the sea that provide that nutrient base, that provide the nitrogen and the iron, the magnesium, all the elements that are required by phytoplankton. So really, we're cutting our own throats by killing whales on that. So that's the ecological reason that we should be protecting whales. But on the other hand, I think, there's incredible potential to be able to communicate with another living thing on this planet. We know that they have incredibly developed brains. Certain parts of the brains are far more developed in various areas than ours, especially in the area of communications and that. And I think that we will be able to, especially now we have AI and all these things. And actually there has been some advances with AI in communicating with humpback whales off the coast of Alaska.
Okay.
I think that there's a real possibility that we could actually break through and communicate with whales. So much that we could learn on that. I don't know if we want to hear what they have to say about us, but but I think that there's a lot of to be gained by learning how to communicate with them.
Can you delve into that a little bit more? What do you know about bioacoustics with the whales? And there's been some studies recently where somebody thought that they learned what the well hello is, and then they sent that out there.
That was that study of Alaska.
Yes.
Right. Back in 1974, Dr. Paul Spong, he was a cytologist, a New Zealand biologist, and he came to us and he said, these are incredibly intelligent creatures, and I think that one day we'll be able to communicate with them. And Paul's, ever since, he runs Orca Lab off of in the Johnstone Straits up in British Columbia, and has worked with orcas primarily. And he was the one who was most instrumental in getting Greenpeace involved with the protection of whales. And I've followed everything he's done over the years. Plus, other John Ford's work on accents and dialects of orcas and that, and other people, Sylvia Earle's work, everybody. There's so much work that's been done on the possibility of interspecies communications. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to be one, the person to do that, but I'm certainly encouraging people who want to pursue that, because I think that it has a lot of potential.
As we were speaking about, whales are known for their intelligence and culture. What is whale culture?
Well, I think every species has a culture. And from bees onwards up, they all have a culture. But whales live in a world of, they communicate with each other. I believe they have art. I believe that they think. I believe that they dream. I believe that they have a lot of social intercourse. I think we found that, dolphins, for example, we've found that they actually identify each other by a name. Mm. So like John or Bob, but, dolphins or whatever that is. That there's so much that we don't know about whales and dolphins and how they communicate. But overall, I believe that they all have a right to live on this planet without being barbarically slaughtered by us. So we really have no business doing that.
What's a path forward for humans where you could cohabitate better with wildlife?
In 2020, I actually established my own church called the Church of Biocentrism.
Okay.
It's not really a church in a religious sense. It's more of a ecologically oriented thing. But I think that if we're to survive, we have to understand the three basic laws of ecology. First, the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it. Second, the law of interdependence, that all species within an ecosystem are interdependent with each other. And third, the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth, a limit to carrying capacity. And when we steal the carrying capacity from other species, we cause diminishment in diversity and interdependence. And that's not very good for all of our futures.
Right.
I think we have to learn to live in harmony with all other species and understand that we're not more important than they are. Remember a few years ago, was it Brett Hume from Fox News called me up and he said, "Did you say that worms, trees, bees, and whales are more important than people?" I said, "Yeah, I think I did." He said, "How could you say something so outrageous, so unchristian?" Well, because they're more important than people. And for a simple reason, they can live here without us. We can't live here without them. We need them. They don't need us. We have to be humble enough to understand that we do need them and that we must coexist and must live with them. Everything from microbes to the great whales, we have to learn to live with them and understand just how valuable they are to each other and to ourselves.
I imagine that you've listened to different whale sounds and whale songs. What's that like for you?
Underwater, when you're listening to the whales and everything, it's magical. It's beautiful. It's music. I had Dr. Roger Payne was a close friend of mine for a long time, and he's both a musician and a whale scientist. And he said, "Well, music is the language of the whales. It's the language of the dolphins." And I think that absolutely explains it. They speak to each other the way we communicate with each other in music. And also, I think they're able to send a great amount of information in small, short sound bites, far more efficient than we do in communication. I think whales communicate with each other like our computers communicate with each other, and they'll be able to send a lot of information in a very short way. But again, there's so much that we don't know, so much that we still have to understand. And I think that we would be much the poorer if the world suddenly had no whales or dolphins in it.
I wonder what's in a whale song. As we understand that a song can be created and developed by a single individual or a pod perhaps, and it can make its way around the world. What's in that communication? And I also understand that, as climate change continues to move forward, that whales will find new places, new feeding grounds, and then they'll send that information out to other whales so that they can all come. If one pod or if a population can't continue to move forward, then the whole population goes away. And so therefore they work together. And what's in contrast with humans is that we find our gold, we find what we like, and we don't tell anybody about it. We could learn a lot from them in that capacity.
I don't think whales and dolphins are capable of deception. because when you have the ability to look right through another body, see the blood moving, and they can tell if the lungs are moving and everything. If I can look at you right now and see the blood coursing through your veins, I can tell if you're being truthful or if you're lying to me. So it's almost a built-in lie detector in that way. So they have to be incredibly honest with each other. They also understand, I think, that they have to live collectively, and their behavior has to be a collective behavior, and that. But then again, what is in their music? I mean, what's in our music? What do we talk about in our music? Everything from love and hope and peace and everything like these. These are abstract sort of things. I mean, when you listen to Beethoven, what are you listening to? You're listening to feelings. It inspires something within you. It's coming deep within you and everything, but you can't really put your finger on what it is. But it makes you feel good, mm-hmm. and it stimulates your intellect. It does all of these things without really explaining how it's done. And so I think that whales are capable of poetry. I think they're capable of all kinds of musical expressions in that respect. I mean, they might be just singing nonsense to each other. We don't know. They might have a profound message. Again, we don't know.
I understand that you're somewhat of an artist as well. What is your focus?
Poetry.
Poetry.
Yes. One of my earliest ambitions was to be a poet. I think I was inspired by Leonard Cohen more than anybody, so that's why I ended up in Greece in 1972. And I sat on a beach in Lindos on the island of Rhodes and tried to write poetry, and finally came to the realization I didn't have enough life experience to be a poet. So I left, and I didn't start writing until I was 45. And now I've been writing quite prolifically on that. And, I've written poetry books like Desperate Mythologies and Cetacean Nation and Songs from the Southern Ocean and that. And I don't know. I can't judge my own poetry. Other people have to do it. But Leonard Cohen thought it was good.
Right. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So what's next from here forward? What are you looking at for the next couple of months, and which direction do you think that this is going to go?
The focus of our campaign when we left Ireland on the John Paul DeJoria was to focus global attention on continued illegal Japanese whaling operations. By arresting me here in Greenland, they've continued that campaign 1,000-fold. We got more coverage of what Japan's doing, plus adding what Denmark's doing in the Faroe Islands. So it's been an enormous success as a campaign. I sort of said, well, I just jumped off my ship, the John Paul DeJoria, and jumped on this ship called the Prison in order to carry on that message. I'm confident that Denmark will not extradite me to Japan because that'll be a death sentence, and they know that. But I don't know how long it'll take for them to decide that. I think that the evidence is in my favor. All the facts are in my favor. They just have to look at it. But there seems to be a bit of a reluctance for the court to look at the facts because there was a reluctance to make a decision. And also we have the political problem because the Greenland court has to decide, the Danish court can't. If the Greenland court decides to extradite, then it goes to the Supreme Court in Denmark, and that could take who knows how long and everything. So it's normally I can be quite patient. I only have one regret is I got 2 little boys, and just on Sunday, I'm allowed 10 minutes a week to speak with them. And on Sunday, I asked my 7-year-old, it's going to be his 8th birthday. I said, what do you want for your birthday? And he said, I just want you to come home. So that was sort of very hurtful. So that's the one thing that I really am concerned with. Other than that, I can be patient whether or not. I mean, it isn't easy saving whales, so I've been arrested numerous times. I've never been convicted of a crime, but I have been arrested, and I have spent a lot of times in prison waiting for decisions. I've been sued and won. I've been betrayed in my own organization and had my own organization taken from me and had to start all over again. And I think that, I've probably trusted people too much. And also, the fact that I didn't focus on the money side of it, the administration side. I let other people do that, and that was a mistake, really. And because if they control the money, they control the organization. That's what happened there. So what was really sad about it is people that I work with, that I mentored, that I promoted from deckhands to captains, were the ones that betrayed me. And but on the positive side, Lamia Samlali, who's been with me since since 2002, she went on and organized and became the president of Sea Shepherd France. And Nathalie Gill, who's president of Sea Shepherd Brazil, and Rob Reed with Sea Shepherd UK, they have remained loyal, not necessarily to me. I mean, they are loyal to me, but they're loyal to the objectives and the principles that we established when we set up Sea Shepherd. And that's what makes difference. The people who did the hostile takeover, they betrayed not just me, they betrayed the principles of the organization. They wanted to turn it into something that would make money, something that would give them secure jobs. And that's what they got. But they've lost their souls in the process. Lamia has been challenging them in court. 3 times she's won in court. Both she and I were illegally dismissed from the global board. We were dismissed without a meeting, without a vote. I was notified, you are hereby dismissed by email. We went to court in the Netherlands and they agreed that it was an illegal dismissal, but nothing happened. Then we went to court in France. They sued us in the French court saying, I couldn't believe this, saying that we were parasites using the Sea Shepherd name for our own gain. Wow. And the judge just laughed at that and threw it out of court and everything. They tried to say that the logos that I designed, they designed. I mean, and the evidence certainly shows the other way. I mean, I designed that Sea Shepherd flag in 1991. They're saying they created it in 2000, but the evidence is right there. There's newspaper clippings, it's on film, television shows prior to that. So I don't know why they're lying in the face of all of that evidence, but that's what they wanted. The thing that's really bothered me with Sea Shepherd Global is that 2 years ago, they got involved with doing a project in Israel. Okay. And I'm going, what are you doing in Israel? Well, we're going to work with the Israeli government to patrol the Israeli coastline for poachers. I said, there's no poachers in the Israeli waters. This is the most defended stretch of water on the face of the planet. What are you doing there? Basically, it was to get in the door and open up Sea Shepherd Israel to raise money. Mm-hmm. And the thing that really bothered me is a partnership with Yamasek, mm-hmm. Which now Yamasek people were now on their boats off of Africa and everything. And Yamasek is an Israeli security firm. Okay. And they're training soldiers and they've been involved with arms smuggling and everything. I said, what are you guys working with these people for? And then 2 of them, just in the last year, posted videos of killing Palestinians, 2 crew members. And they took a leave from the boats to go and kill Palestinians and posted it on Facebook of doing this. And one of them advocating the genocide of the Palestinian people. I said, how can you be involved with that and everything?
Massive conflict of interest.
Yeah, but so there's actually a court case going on about that. They spent, I don't know the figures to global, Sea Shepherd USA spent $600,000 in payments to Yamasek. And I go, this is ridiculous. And why are they carrying guns on board Sea Shepherd ships? Right. Why arm people? This is totally opposed to anything that we stood for.
Please delve into your values and what is direct action?
In 1977, I set up a philosophy or a strategy I call aggressive nonviolence. And so what it means is to aggressively intervene without causing injury to any person. And I've never caused an injury. My group has never caused an injury in 50 years, ever since the day we began. Very, very consistent on there. And I think that that's something we have to be steadfast on, of not causing injury. So we get called a lot of names, you know, when I remember I did the Bill Maher show one time and he said, well, people call you an eco-terrorist. I said, I never worked for Monsanto, so I mean, that doesn't really apply. But the word eco-terrorism, that's used for anybody you disagree with nowadays. The fact is that not only have I never injured anybody, I don't know anybody in the environmental movement who's ever injured anybody, you know, but environmentalists have been murdered many times over in Latin America, through Africa, and, you know, and nobody seems to think that's a big deal. But environmentalists are always tarred with the brush of being potential terrorists and whatever. So, but I'm a strong believer in Gandhian principles and of not causing injury to any life form. All of our ships have always been vegan vessels. Mm-hmm. Well, not always. They were vegetarian up until 1999, head vegan. But because back in 1979, nobody knew what vegan was. That's right. But so I've tried to promote that kind of nonviolence, not just to people, but to animals and to nature. Now, another example, what is nonviolence? If a poacher is about to shoot an elephant and you knock the gun out of his hand, that to me is an act of nonviolence. You've saved a life, because destroying a non-sentient object that is involved with the illegal taking of a life, that to me is a definition of nonviolence. Mm-hmm. When I wrote my book, Hitman for the Kindness Club, what that was based on was, and the reason I left Greenpeace, because I was the campaign leader for the SEAL campaigns off of Labrador and Newfoundland in 76, 77. And in 77, a sealer was about to club a baby seal. And I ran forward and I grabbed the club in his hand and I threw it in the water. And I picked up the seal, took it to safety. I was then brought before the board of directors of Greenpeace. There's a lot of politics involved too. Sure. But I was accused of theft and vandalism. So you stole the man's property. But his club? Yeah, and you destroyed his property, vandalism. I said, I thought I was there to save lives. Right. And I said, if I had to do it again, I will do it again. And they said, well, we don't think that you should be in Sea Shepherd, in Greenpeace anymore. That's why I set up Sea Shepherd, was as an alternative. It's interesting, though, that 6 of those board members then joined Sea Shepherd later, including Bob Hunter, the founding president of that. So Bob, Bob was the person who actually brought me into Greenpeace originally. And then he was also instrumental in me being removed from Greenpeace. And then he joined my crew later to become involved. In fact, he mortgaged his own house to get me the Greenpeace to the ship and everything. So things went like that. I mean, Rod Marining, one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, visited me here in this prison a couple of weeks ago. And so these are longtime friends and allies, and, things go up and down sometimes.
They do. Ebb and flow, yeah?
Yeah. But so anyways, where was I?
Well, one of my questions, a statement really. So there's a world out there of people that are watching this and are really rooting for you. Do you have any words for them? Like, what's an action that they can take?
I think people have taken a lot of actions. I think that the support has been overwhelming. I was really surprised to get President Macron of France to intercede on my behalf, and the new Prime Minister, and the President Lula of Brazil, and the Panamanian environmental minister. People like James Cameron, Martin Sheen, and Pierce Brosnan, Sylvia Earle, Jane Goodall, all came out in support. And I've received 2,300 letters since I've been here. And there's been like over 1 million names on petitions and everything. So I think the support has been incredible, but I look at this really as a support for what we stand for.
Yes.
I'm just some guy in prison, but but I think that they all see what this is all about. And they all see that, we're trying to stop the slaughter of dolphins and pilot whales in the Faroe Islands. We're trying to stop the resurrection of commercial whaling. And one of the things that's lost in this, and that we're trying to revive, is to remind people that what Japan is doing is illegal and has been illegal since 1986. There's a global moratorium on commercial whaling. They're in contempt of the Australian Federal Court for killing whales in Australian and Antarctic waters, which they were fined $1 million Australian for, which they refused to pay, and they're in contempt of court. Japanese whaling ships cannot go into Australian waters or else they'll be arrested. And in 2014, the International Court of Justice upheld a ruling that what they're doing is illegal and it's not research. Japan's response to that was, we're going to do it anyway. So here's the real problem. What's the point of international law, international treaty, if there is no enforcement? That is why we do what we do, because there's nobody enforcing it. A couple of years ago or a year or so ago, everybody was like, we got a high seas treaty. I'm going, what's that mean? It doesn't mean anything unless you enforce it.
That's right.
And so this is what we're trying. I wish I didn't have to do any of this. I'd rather just sit back and write poetry and let an international environmental police force do all of this. That's all that's required. I mean, what's the point of having the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary if you can kill whales in the sanctuary?
That's right. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And also, why is it that Japan can destroy a $2 million vessel? No consequences. Why can they fire stun grenades, I guess, at Animal Planet cameramen and knock the cameras out of their hands? No consequences. How can they shoot me? No consequences. After I got shot in 2007, I took the bullet from my Kevlar vest and I brought it to the Australian Federal Police and I said, can you do an investigation on this? And their answer was, not our jurisdiction. I said, well, then how come when I come back from the Southern Ocean at Japan's request, you look at my computers and run through the ship looking for evidence of wrongdoing? You're investigating their complaint, but you refuse to investigate my complaint. So why is this a one-sided sort of thing? Why is the law on the side of the criminals?
Yeah, why is it so hard to do the right thing?
Yeah, because the problem is there's a lack of economic and political motivation to uphold international conservation law.
Is there anything, a message you'd like to send to your family?
Well, I get to speak to them for 10 minutes every week. My sons seem to be doing well. I keep encouraging my oldest son. He'll be 8 this week, actually. He's a chess champion, so I'm encouraging him to. I said, just concentrate on your games and everything. And I'm really proud of him. He's number 5 in the United States and number 68 in worldwide. And he's working hard on it. And so I've got him, and my other son just turned 3 in August. And then I got my daughter, she's 42, and I got 2 grandchildren too. So they're, but I'm doing this for them too, because, for their future and that. And my children understand that. So I have that. My whole family supports me actually on that. And I think that children are really the key. I mean, last year I wrote my first children's book called We Are the Ocean. Okay. And I'm going to do more of those. I think that, that you can really, I got more of a response from writing a children's book than from any of the other books that I've written. And since I've been in here, I've at least 1,000 drawings and poems from children of whales and dolphins. And I'm going to put a book together of all these when I get out and everything. I've been trying to answer. I think I've answered about 100. But you can't answer all
That's a lot.
on that. But I've been trying to answer. But I will, when I get out, send everybody a letter and probably a certificate of appreciation for their support coming in here.
Well, when this ends, because I believe it will, what's the first thing you're going to do?
Well, I'll go back to France and be with my family, of course, and that I got to spend a few weeks with my boys, so that's the most important thing. I'm a little worried about my 3-year-old because I've been away from him now for about 3 months, and I think that's a crucial age to be separated from. But the mother takes good care of them, so that's good, and she tends to get a little stressed, but she's doing okay too on them.
Well, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Well, one of the things I wanted to emphasize is that, again, on our approach, I've always felt that the most powerful weapon in the world is a camera. And that's why everything we do is documented. And I think that that's where we've had our most accomplishments is through the documentaries and the television shows and that. One of the reasons Costa Rica had put me on the red notice for, I don't know, do you know that story?
Please tell me.
Well, in 2002, we were on our way to Costa Rica to work with the Costa Rican government to protect Cocos Island. But as we were passing through Guatemalan waters, I came across a shark finning operation, and it was a Costa Rican vessel. Mm-hmm. I called up the Guatemalan government, and I said, what should we do? He says, can you stop them? I said, sure, I could stop them. And we did stop them. Didn't hurt anybody, didn't damage any property. But we stopped them, pulled up their nets or their lines actually, and then just carried on to Costa Rica. But when we arrived there, I'm arrested on 8 counts of attempted homicide. The fishermen said I tried to kill them, but I had Rob Stewart with me making the film Sharkwater, filmed everything. So we went into the Costa Rican court, looked at the film. Well, there's nothing here. And I was acquitted. Well, they didn't even charge. They didn't go anywhere. I was out the door. That was okay. A week later, I'm arrested again. 8 counts of attempted assault. I don't even know what that is, but anyway, it was 8 counts of attempted assault. Back into court, showed the film, no evidence, walked out again. Didn't think anything of it. I got clearance to leave Costa Rican water in writing. Mm-hmm. I got clearance to do that, and we carried on with our work with Cocos Island. 10 years later, arriving in Germany, I'm arrested on a Costa Rican warrant for something called shipwreck endangerment. Don't even know what that is. Mm-hmm. While I was being held, Japan put in a warrant for my arrest. Now, while I was under house arrest, I get a message from a supporter in the German Ministry of Justice saying that when you go in to report, because I had to do this every day, when you report to the police, you're going to be sent immediately to Japan. No appeal. You're going to go to Japan. So I jumped bail and left Germany. And it was only after that the red notices were given. I think mainly because of Germany, on behalf of Costa Rica. Now, here's the interesting thing. In 2017, Costa Rica dropped it with a change of government. Had nothing to do with judicial, it was a change of government. So that's ultimately political. But why was Costa Rica involved in this? Because in December of 2011, the President Chinchilla of Costa Rica met with the Prime Minister of Japan in Tokyo, and this charge came 2 weeks after that meeting. So Costa Rica was being used by Japan in order to have me arrested.
That's right.
And that. So all those are the kind of games they were playing. Now, when I left Germany, I mean, I have 2 nationalities, but of course, they had both my passports, so I didn't have any papers. So I had to, Lamia from France, so I arranged for a sailboat to pick me up in the Netherlands. So we sailed across the Atlantic and had an incredible experience off of Nova Scotia because my brother was dying of cancer. And he had always wanted to be part of a campaign, but, he had a job and his family. And I got a call. He said, "I'm coming out to get you." So what he did was he got a boat. He couldn't charter a boat. He bought a boat. My brother-in-law actually bought a boat, a fishing boat, because he told him, I'm dying of cancer. I just want to do some sport fishing, before I die. And so they sold him the boat. So he comes out at 2:00 in the morning, picks me up, takes me ashore in Nova Scotia. And I landed in Nova Scotia. And then when he returned the boat in the morning, they felt sorry for him, gave him his money back. So it was, and then I went up and visited with Farley Mowat in Cape Breton. And then because I was raised on a border town, I knew how to cross that border. So I crossed into the U.S., and boarded my vessel, the Bridget Bardot, off of Catalina. And then we sailed down to American Samoa, transferred back to the Steve Irwin, and then we went down and confronted the Japanese fleet again in the Southern Ocean, and then came back, transferred back to the Bridget Bardot, and spent the next 6 months pretty much in exile in the South Pacific Island. And I have to say, it wasn't the worst time of my life. I got to spend time with so much wildlife and everything, in Vanuatu and Tonga and places like that. And then finally, I got a message from the Secretary of State, John Kerry, saying that they had gotten this affidavit and that I was free to return. So I came back to Long Beach. Actually, it was JFK Jr. who actually met me.
Oh, it was?
And that, he escorted me up from Catalina Island into Long Beach. And then the authorities came down and passport, and I'm back into the country and everything. Then we went, this is a little bit of a longer story.
That's okay.
February 2012, Judge Richard Jones of Seattle rejected a Japanese application for an injunction against our operations in the Southern Ocean, which we thought was pretty strange. I mean, how could Japan apply to the U.S. to get an injunction on Dutch ships operating out of Australia against Japanese vessels in the Southern Ocean? And that's what Judge Richard Jones decided. He says, no, you come into my courtroom with unclean hands because you're in contempt of the Australian federal court and you want me to give you an injunction. I'm not going to give it to you. So we felt perfectly secure in going ahead with our campaign until December 2012, when the Ninth Circuit sends us a message. They gave them the injunction. No reason why. Here's your injunction. Then we're said, you're not to approach within 500 yards of any whaling vessel in the Southern Ocean. We're talking about a multinational crew with Dutch flags and everything. Who is the Ninth Circuit to say this?
That's right.
So I felt that, being a U.S. citizen, they could probably come after me. So I actually stepped down as captain and made Sid Chakravarti from India became captain on that, but I was there. So anyway, what happened when we got back to the States in October of 2013, we were charged with 22 counts of contempt of a federal court injunction. So we went to court in Seattle in front of Peter Shaw, spent a week in court, and we were acquitted. Great, no problem.
Yep.
A year later, Ninth Circuit overturns the acquittal. I never even saw these judges.
And why?
They didn't give any explanation why. Justice Alex Kaczynski labeled me as a pirate. He didn't charge me with piracy, but I am officially a pirate according to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal in the United States. Kaczynski hates environmentalists. One satisfaction I got is that two or 3 years later, he was dismissed for sexual harassment and downloading pornography. So I think he got his just desserts. But this guy I never met him. I never talked to him and that. But what happened was really interesting after that. He said, "You're guilty, and you guys are going to pay damages to the Japanese." Well, that could be $50-60 million. Well, we can't do that. And fortunately, we had legal insurance, so that whole thing had cost us about $8 million up to that point, which I don't think I'll ever get legal insurance or be allowed to get legal insurance again after that. But what happened was that the Japanese came to us. They didn't want damages. They were actually stunned that they were being asked for damages, and there was a good reason why they didn't want damages. That meant they would have to open their books and explain everything, including the $30 million of the tsunami relief fund that went into the Japanese whaling industry. Wow. They'd have to explain that. So what we did the next day, we charged them of piracy for the destruction of the Audi Gill. Now they have to come into the U.S. courts because they brought it into the U.S. courts. And now they have to open up their books.
Okay.
So they came to us and mediated a settlement because we could have won the case, but it would have been another $10 million, which we didn't have.
Sure.
So the settlement was that, okay, the injunction would stand, but only against Sea Shepherd USA, not Australia, not France, not any of the other countries. So we could carry on doing it, and the USA would just step back and not doing it. And the other thing, they had to give us a certain some amount of money.
Okay.
Now, never said this before, but the court said that I'm not allowed to say how much they gave us.
Okay.
But I'm not the Sea Shepherd USA anymore, so screw it. Paid us more than we gave them in legal fees.
So really?
We came out on top of that. I just thought we give the exact amount. They paid us more than
I was like, what is it?
that. But so anyway, so that settled that. So they carried on in 2014. There was no whaling because the International Court of Justice was taken to court. 2015, 2016, they returned. So Sea Shepherd did Operation Relentless in 2015 and Operation Nemesis in 2016-17. And that was under the leadership of Australia, Sea Shepherd Australia, and specifically Bob Brown and the Bob Brown Foundation. And I was not involved in it. Sea Shepherd USA was not involved in it. So that's how we got around that whole thing. And finally, we figured that it cost Japan so much money. We figured we cost them over $100 million. But most importantly, we saved 6,500 whales in the process.
Definitely.
But in the process, we humiliated Japan. We caused a great deal of shame to Japan, and that is the reason they're after me now. It's a pretty bogus charge. It's a minor charge. It's certainly not an extraditable offense. But in Denmark, they found an ally because of the killing of pilot whales and dolphins.
Yeah, I'd like to see that end.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully it will. I'm quite confident that they won't extradite me. If they do, they'll be looking really bad, and it'll go before the European Human Rights Commission and everything. Japanese prisons are notorious. They're medieval. You go to Japan, you are interrogated every single day till you confess. You don't even get before a court until you confess. That's why they have a 99% conviction rate. A couple of my crew members of protecting dolphins were arrested and went through that whole process. Aaron Vermeulen from the Netherlands was one of the few who actually won his case. He was in jail for a number of weeks, but he won his case because of a tape recorder of an accuser lying. We had him on tape. They couldn't get around that. This guy lied. Mm-hmm. And so that was his reason for being acquitted. But he did not confess through this whole thing.
Isn't it odd to be detained for such a period of time as you have?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I'm 65 days now, and they haven't even looked at the evidence. They refuse to look at the evidence. And so I think that in itself is a violation of my human rights, I think.
It is. And what's it like in here? I remember reading an article recently that you said that it's one of the best prisons you've been in. You see icebergs and whales going by every day.
I look out my prison window. I see the fjord and the mountains and the icebergs, and I've seen whales out there. I see Arctic foxes. I see ravens, and so wildlife-wise. And also everybody's fairly decent here. The prisoners are friendly. The guards are friendly. And it's also, as far as when it comes to diet, you actually buy your own food, cook your own food, and you're so being vegan or vegetarian, I mean, you can deal with that quite easily here, although there's a limited amount of what you can eat. But overall, it's not uncomfortable. And I could stay here for 2 years if that was the case, if it wasn't for my children.
Right, of course. Well, and to note, on our way in today, there were a number of people out there, and they saw us and they said, "Are you going in to see Captain Paul Watson?" And I said, "We are." I wasn't sure what to think about it. And they said, "Please say hello. We support you." And it was a beautiful thing. So
Wonderful. But did you film?
we weren't allowed to have our cameras.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's right.
But they're probably visiting people here or something.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for
You're welcome.